This episode is dedicated to our sponsors over on Patreon. Thank you all.
Welcome to Sci-Fi and Fantasy Read Along. My name is Yule.
And I'm DM Phil, ready to be here.
Welcome back, guys.
ATN, how are you?
We are here today to discuss Chapter 9 of Slaughterhouse 5. It is the next to last chapter, and it is essentially the last chapter that has anything to do with Billy Pilgrim as a character. He's in Chapter 10, but it's just long enough for us to merge him and the narrator together.
In Chapter 10, anything with Billy Pilgrim we've already seen, actually. That's kind of neat.
This chapter was kind of neat. It wrapped up all the loose ends. It answered a lot of the questions that we'd had from earlier in the book. It answered some of our speculation. It closed a lot of circles. And I thought it was an extremely satisfying chapter in a lot of ways.
Did it finalize the last question?
What was the last question?
Whether Billy Pilgrim's just a nutbag?
It did for me. It did for me.
Okay, well, we'll get to that at the end then. Very good.
How did you guys feel about this chapter? I just told you how I felt about it.
Well, I mean, it's that whole idea of that typewriter carriage, slam it back and start the story over and pick up some of the pieces that were left behind. Mm-hmm. And it answers it, and then here in the last chapter, or the second to last chapter, it does it yet again, and it, like you said, it just really closes up a lot of holes, so I totally dug it, yeah.
Philip?
I thought the wrap-up in Chapter 9, with all the random crap you've been reading about for 8 chapters, finally kind of like makes sense in every single thing that's happened. So that was actually really, really good.
But the one thing I would say is, if you were reading a story about Billy Pilgrim, it actually ended last chapter when we found out when he dies, you know?
Nope, that was last chapter?
Was it the last chapter or the one right before that? I can't remember.
I think that was Chapter 7.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the earlier chapters we actually see, or...
Oh, he died in Chapter 6. He died in Chapter 6.
Was it 6? Holy cow. So...
Start over.
I don't know if I should start over, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that if we as humans, when we're reading books normally, we have a beginning, a middle, and end. It's all very linear, and obviously this book isn't that way. We have seen Billy's ultimate end earlier in the book. What you said, Chapter 6.
Just after the middle.
Yeah, and now we feel that there's a conclusion, even though his life ended all the way back then. And now we're getting a conclusion because we're getting all this middle gooey stuff that actually is the very beginning. Very strange.
Do you guys remember where we left our story in the last chapter?
That was the chapter where Billy crashed, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was all the hospital stuff with him. Good
night, Americans. Sleep well.
Yeah, it ended when he left the city and he found an innkeeper, and the innkeeper treated him like a human being, and they all apparently shacked up there, and he was fed.
He was beered.
They gave him beer.
A little bit of food, beer, and water or something, I don't remember. And a place to sleep.
He was showing humanity, compassion, and the end of the story was sleep well, Americans.
We pick up Chapter 9 with the tale of how Valencia Merbel Pilgrim died.
Oh, it's so tragic.
I thought from the very beginning that she was a suicide because she died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And we found that out in Chapter 2, I think.
Wait, did they say she died of carbon monoxide poisoning then? I didn't remember that.
I remember it because I got it wrong.
I mean, there are accidents that occur in older homes. But even still, this is so tragic.
There was a young girl in Berkeley that died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And she was one of 2 sisters that were being kept in an apartment by a slumlord who was using them as slave labor. Do you remember that?
I remember about that, yes.
They were moving her body in a rug like a movie, and somebody called the cops and they got busted. Berkeley. That's in Berkeley.
And these guys were like operating for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, too.
They own many, many restaurants. They're very, very wealthy.
We'll have a special podcast on that someday.
That's some dirty, dirty
Look
stuff.
for it.
Tell me, how did Valencia Merble die? I mentioned the carbon monoxide, but give me the gist of it. How did it happen?
Well, it was right after Billy's plane went down, and he was put in the hospital. He's still alive. She finds out about this, and she rushes crazily driving. And there's like a car accident. It's not so bad, but her car's pretty messed up. But all of her tailpipes are gone. And I'm imagining, they say it how loud it is when she like pulls up to the hospital that Billy's at. But they're like, it's like a tank or something.
A bomber, I thought.
Think of like the most annoying loud car you've ever experienced. And like, just double that, triple that, quadruple it, and that's what we got going on here.
She left her exhaust system behind at the scene of the accident that happened on the freeway, and when she gets to the hospital, she never even makes it inside. She slumps against the horn, and they come out to check on her, and she is turned azure like the sky, and she dies an hour later from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh, yeah. She looked like she was an Avatar or something like that,
Honestly, I don't comprehend how losing a tailpipe can make. Does it automatically funnel all the exhaust into the inside of the car? And if it was me, I mean, you open.
It wasn't you. It was Valencia Merbel.
Yeah, you open the windows. I don't get that part.
That may have been part of the problem, because like my 4Runner, if you roll the back window down and drive along, the car fills up with exhaust. You can smell it.
Oh, just by how the air circulates?
It just comes right in the back somehow and then just sits in there. Huh. So like I can't have that down when I drive. I have to have the side windows down. Her back window was cracked. Her trunk was open. It could have been coming in that way because the trunk is not a hard seal between the outside world.
Well, the back of her car was described as
destroyed.
It was destroyed, yes.
Yeah, no. Actually, give me the quote because the quote is glorious.
It is glorious. He says, "A body and fender man's wet dream."
Yeah.
There's a lot of it's not innuendo. There's a lot of comparisons to things with sex here in this
violence
book.
and sex.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, definitely.
I've had an epiphany about that, but I'm going to wait till the end.
An epiphany?
An epiphany.
An epiphany.
It's like an award that they give out for like clear thought. Okay, so we have Valencia Merbel has died at the same outside the hospital where Billy is. They don't know what's going to happen to him. She adores Billy. That's why she was hysterical when she went to the hospital, and that's what caused her to have that accident.
Like I said, it's tragic.
It is a tragedy, right?
But I mean, without ever having seen it, this could be very, very easily played up for a lot of humor in like a movie or something like that. The happenstance or the way he writes it feels like it's just happenstance. And then, you end something with "so it goes" all the time.
It's almost like Keystone Cops,
right? Yeah. Sure.
Kind of.
Yeah.
All right, so Billy Pilgrim is in the hospital. I don't believe he's conscious. He is sharing a room with a man named Bertram Copeland Rumford. And he's been mentioned before, although we didn't meet him. His relative passed by on a boat during Billy Pilgrim's honeymoon.
The very pretty people? Was that what it was?
Uh-huh. Why is Rumford in the hospital?
What, he messed up his leg or arm or something like that? So this guy's 70 years old. He's described as looking and acting like half of that age. And this dude has a wife, a new young wife.
23.
High school dropout with an IQ of 103.
Do you know why that's significant?
Yeah, hold on a second. This is all about Rumford. She is there to make him look like a super god. Like he's a stud. This guy.
I'm sorry, can you see me rolling my eyes?
Yeah, he feels very pompous to me. Now, back to this young woman.
Well, why is he in the hospital?
He hurt himself hiking or something
skiing.
Like that. Not hiking, skiing. This guy's doing virile activity like a young virile man would do, except he's 70.
And maybe he overestimated himself a little, but he broke his leg.
Well, he does sound like a bad A. I mean, he really does. I mean, like in practice, he really does. But unfortunately, he acts that way at the expense of everyone else who doesn't meet his ridiculous standards for success. So, AT, you brought up why is the age of the girl relevant?
No, the IQ.
The IQ.
Yeah.
I mean,
she has 103. She drops out of high school, but doesn't read very well. I thought 103 was a pretty good score when it comes to IQ.
technically it's above average.
The average scale was 80 to 120. Like if you look up 103 IQ,
Yeah.
it's like this is the average IQ.
So the interesting thing about IQ tests is they always adjust the IQ test to where whatever the test is, average is always 100. And they've got a drift. So generation by generation, the drift is actually getting higher and higher.
But the number stays the same.
Yeah, the number stays the same. 100 is always average at the time that you take the test. But, you know, for anybody to have an average or an IQ of 103, that's technically that's 3 hairs above average.
For a person that doesn't read.
She doesn't read well.
Right. Just interesting.
Some people don't like to read.
Well, there's a paradox there that I don't comprehend, or she's faking it, or
No, because later on in the book, I mean, maybe she's just responding to how Rumford treats her, but she's very barely one sentence answers, you know, to him. Maybe she knows her place again.
But I think what he's trying to point out is human behavior. Nothing more, nothing less.
Giving them both some character.
Yes, exactly.
But why is 103 important? You know,
It's
other
just
than
the average, man. It's just
Yeah.
it's just letting us know that she's just the average human.
No, it's a hair above average. I don't think that's
Whatever. The IQ 103. If you just look that up in Google, it says the average IQ. Like that's
Okay.
the definition.
I did not
So,
realize that it was. But
slightly above, slightly below, exactly average. She's right there.
That's
And I think this
interesting.
is Vonnegut telling us that he thinks that the average human being is a ding dong.
You know, I didn't see it that way, but that actually kind of makes sense versus a lot of other things we've read in this book is that,
she
yes.
can't read well, and etc.
Yeah, and he's saying the average person, actually 3 hairs above average, is kind of an idiot.
So why is Rumford? What is he doing while he's in the hospital?
Rumford is at the hospital waiting for his wife to bring him all these books that have to do with war and Dresden specifically. Because his buddies wrote the forewords in the books and he wanted to see what they had to say about things.
Yeah,
And that's kind of like his whole thing. He's like this like historian kind of guy.
he's working on a history for like
Right.
the Air Guard or something during World War II.
Right.
And I guess Dresden, the information about Dresden has just been declassified and the Americans have found out about it. So he's working on a revised history that includes Dresden in the history. This section gave us the justification for World War II, which was the complete and utter obliteration of Nazism. That's the justification, right, for World War II. And it also gives us an explanation of why Dresden was bombed.
There's a lot in here to go through and the technical details.
We don't have to have the details. I mean, just give me the long short.
The long short of it, let's classify Rumsford right now because he comes across. How do you think he comes across to you guys?
He's retired military. He's very strict. He's very rigid in his thinking. He applies a different standard to other people than himself. And he is kind of a hard ass.
Yeah. Pompous.
To quote, yeah, he is, yeah, and that's to quote, and I like this quote a lot. It actually doesn't come from him. It comes from Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "I could carve a better man out of a banana."
Is this like a Chuck Norris joke before there were Chuck Norris jokes?
He's saying that about Billy as Billy's unconscious in bed screaming about giving up and, you know, leave me alone, you know.
Yes, all of the stuff that he does is, yeah, it makes Rumford really, really hate Billy.
he and
Despises
hence
him.
the banana bit, you know.
Thinks he's less than human.
Do you think it's easy to carve a banana? Like, compared to other fruit?
How ripe is it?
I don't know, man. I mean,
An unripe banana? Yeah, absolutely. It'd be like carving butter. Easy.
And you mentioned it earlier. They're trying to justify atrocities of war. They're trying to justify it even then, and trying to cover it up even then.
They did cover it up.
Oh, they
They
did.
kept it secret for years and years and years. And then when Rumford actually is asked why was it kept secret, and his response is that a bunch of soft-hearted people were going to make a stink if they found out.
Another thing that was at the end when this was again a quote from Truman. He said, "And we have now won the battle of the laboratories, as if we have won the battle of other battles. And I don't know, it really stuck with me. It was just circumstance, fate, luck, whatever you want to call it. We evolved a better weapon faster than the other guy did, and we won.
Right.
And essentially that was it. That's why we won.
Yeah, if they had gotten the nuclear bomb before we did, pretty sure they'd have used it on England.
They were talking about all the different, like the V1 and the V2s, which I didn't know anything about. And
did you look that stuff up?
I did. I actually looked that up because I thought we'd probably get to it.
That's Gravity's Rainbow, by the way.
Oh, that's what it's about, Gravity's Rainbow?
The parabola of the V1 rocket.
Oh, the V1s seem like they kind of get like shot through the air and then they get shot out and dropped or something like that. But the V2 is the one where it goes up in orbit and then comes back down.
Okay, then is parabola of the V2, I guess.
Right. And of course, you know, and I was watching a thing on it talking about scuds and stuff like that. So it sounds like they weren't very, it was like last minute or...
They got them late in the war.
That's what it was,
late in the war. And they used them as much as they possibly could, indiscriminately, raining down all over England.
Sure, they had a lot of space to cover, so it really didn't matter if they hit what they wanted to hit, I'm assuming.
I think they were trying to bring it into the war just like we were.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Their targeting mechanisms were not great, but they were still actually fairly sophisticated.
They were hitting cities across the channel.
And so one of the principal scientists behind that was Werner von Braun,
a German rocketeer.
And we didn't hesitate a moment to snatch him up, give him complete amnesty, and say, please, we want you to work on our space program.
That's right.
All the way up until and through the Apollo programs in NASA.
The Russians did the same thing, by the way. The Russians and the Americans basically split up Germany's higher echelon of scientists and took them to their homelands, each other, right? Or each bearing off half, as it were.
Just like the countries, basically, or the Germany.
Split Germany up too at the end of the war, yeah. Okay, so Barbara arrives at the VA hospital to visit her father. Her mother has just died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Her father is broken in a hospital bed. She's been given drugs by doctors so that she can keep going.
And Robert's on his way, too, from Vietnam.
Yeah, he's on a plane.
That's a big deal, too.
I would like to point out the year specified here is 1968.
Ah, okay.
Oh, excellent. But Billy, he isn't in 1968. He's in 1958. He's doing optometry to a Mongolian idiot.
We're going to talk about the word idiot in just a minute. But before that, I had a kind of a change of heart for Barbara here. Because when it's put into context, her being a flibbertigibbet makes a lot of sense. Like, she is under an incredible amount of stress, and she's in mourning. And, like, this is formative stuff when you're 20 years old. She's not even, she's 18. She's 18 at this point in time.
And she's medically sedated. So when you go back to chapter 2 or 3 or wherever that was, when she was being neurotic...
I'm impressed that she was able to become that neurotic.
Yeah.
She's all drugged up.
Yes, it explains her behavior now, not before.
I don't think that the drugs are explaining her behavior. I think that that's just to keep her going. Like, I think that the shock of what has happened to her has caused her behavior to become high-strung.
That's fair. That's way more relevant. And I think, like I said, to go back to what we said in the beginning, this chapter fills in a lot of the explanations and plot holes. Not plot holes, just gaps in our comprehension.
Well, for example, we now know how his wife died. We heard about it early in the book that he was a widower. Now we have the story. And that's how this entire chapter, that's a lot of what this chapter is, in my opinion. It's just filling in the gaps to give us more of this story, to give us the context. I mean, to me, it's like this amazing payoff, this chapter, because of it. Okay, so you're right, Yule. Billy is not present in the hospital room while his daughter is there. He's back in 1948 or whatever.
58.
58. He's inspecting the eyes of the Mongolian idiot, and that's a quote. But I think that was a diagnosis at the time.
Right.
Not an insult, just a diagnosis.
Interesting.
We can't. I don't think we should judge people on how they spoke then, right?
I assume an idiot is someone that just really doesn't say much. And probably doesn't,
Well, are they dumb?
I do not know.
that was a
that is to be
diagnosis as well.
decided. But even if they don't say anything, you just kind of assume, you know.
Hold this thought off, and I actually agree with Etienne here about his interpretation of this, or evaluation of this Mongolian kid is what we would consider to be insulting. But I'm gonna hold off my evaluation to the very end. But keep this in mind on why.
Oh, okay. We're gonna come back to this.
Yeah, I think planned ahead.
Sure we will.
Awesome. I hope you took a note.
Oh, I took a note. Yeah.
So we're back in the VA hospital again, and Robert is there this time.
Oh, wait. No. You skipped over a part which is absolutely completely irrelevant. It's about he's
16 years old.
No,
and he's in a hospital,
Mr.
right?
Farty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, so why even put this in the book? Why?
Because getting old does suck.
Yeah, it does. But why put this in the book?
Dude, I don't know. Why did it bother you?
No,
I think that's a more important question.
It's not bothering me. I'm baiting you. It's these little snippets that I've had a problem with. It's the entire book, and now at the very end, I think I'm getting it.
Starting to get it. What do you think you're getting?
I think, and I don't want to ruin it, you know.
Well, hold on. Give us the context for what this experience is, because he did jump 2 times before he gains consciousness.
So he's in a waiting room in a doctor because he has an infected thumb, and he's 16 years old, right? And there's an old man in the waiting room also because he's in horrible agony because he has bad gas and he's farting nonstop. This entire time slip section is 2 paragraphs. 1, Billy is hurt, and 2, there's an old man farting, and that's it. And then it moves on.
I knew getting old was bad, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad. So something like that.
Yes, he did say that.
Farting. Just, hold
on to that nugget of wisdom. And
are we saving this to the end also?
Yes, we are. I want to start pointing these things out because I think I'm finally starting to get it.
Good. I'm interested.
All right, Fart McGee over there.
All right.
Got
so
it down.
After we've done traveling for Mr. Farty, the doctor's office with Mr. Farty, we're back in the VA hospital, and Robert, the son, the Green Beret, is there, and Billy is conscious again, but he's kind of pretending to be absent, even though he's there. He closes his eyes, and sometime later, his son is gone. Rumford is griping and bitching, and Billy is pretending to be listless.
Yeah, he is. But man, this section infuriated me.
Yeah, of course.
It infuriated me. His son comes back from war, Vietnam War, and he is decorated. He's got a Purple Heart and a Silver Star and a Bronze Star with 2 clusters. And I don't know if you looked those up, but I did. And this guy is incredible. And he was not incredible as a kid. I mean,
yeah, he was a ne'er-do-well. He was a delinquent. He was drunk at 16. Like, he was an alcoholic at 16.
Yeah, and he did typical stuff.
What are the medals?
Purple Heart, as you probably know, was
wounded in action.
Wounded in action. Silver Star was gallantry in combat. Bronze Star with 2 clusters means exceptional emeritus service. Also, generally attributed to combat. And I looked it up, and like the highest you can get is like 21. And like they've got this incredible scale for like every time it happens, and you can just get more and more Bronze Stars and this other ribbon.
Do you get more clusters, or do you get more stars, or what?
There's no stars at all. There's a ribbon and there's an oak cluster.
I thought it was a Bronze Star.
Yeah, there's no star at all. So you forget that. There's no star. There's just a ribbon, which is what you see on a military person's chest or above their heart.
Right.
And then you get all these stars, and every time it happens, you get upgraded and upgraded and upgraded and upgraded. And like the highest level they have is 21. So I don't know if nobody's ever gotten above 21, but the Bronze Stars eventually start trumping up into Silver Stars. But it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Amazing, because
it's like silver to gold.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah, it's copper to silver.
Platinum. Platinum pieces 5.
It's copper to silver.
Bronze.
The point is, this kid has come back, and he had a rough upbringing, but he comes back, and he has been this extraordinary soldier. When he met his father, he said, "Dad," and then Billy Pilgrim just closed his eyes, and that, oh my God, that just infuriates me. It's like, is he disappointed in his son? Did he refuse to acknowledge it? And one of the themes that we know of this book is kind of like an anti-war book. That's spitting on.
No, it's not. It's like turning your back on.
It's your father.
It's not spitting.
It's your father.
I get that. Yeah, but all he did was go unconscious.
No, he didn't go unconscious. He chose to close his eyes.
Yeah, he closed his eyes.
Well, now, I know that the narrator is the person that talks about poor old Edgar Derby, and he also talks about, or the narrator also says that he's the proud Green Beret, or something like that he always says. I was always just kind of assuming that that's this guy saying who these are as far as Billy Pilgrim's concerned. There's really no reason why I should have thought that. But I, for some reason, still thought that Billy Pilgrim is proud of his son for making something of himself. He is pretty lackadaisical when it comes to, oh, you did a really good thing. I'm sure, that type of thing. But
well, think about how he must have parented this kid also for him to have been such a delinquent at 16 and etc.
I don't even know if he parented this kid.
Absentee parenting.
Yeah.
I mean, completely. He wasn't involved in the kid's raising, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, completely.
And you're probably right, Philip. Why did it make you mad? Why does it bother you?
Probably because I'm a dad, I'm a son, and if I had accomplished half of what this young man had succeeded in accomplishing, I'd want some acknowledgement from my own father.
Accomplishments in war.
Yeah, Billy might not. Remember how Billy didn't like war, and you remember how Billy thought that the best story. No, the narrator thought the best stories from war were the people who would actually fought in the war and then didn't like it anymore. And I don't think Billy had a good time in the war.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. There's something
A little bit
here.
of disappointment that his son excels at war.
Maybe that's part of it. Also, that he didn't, and maybe Billy thought he saw way worse than his own son did. I don't really psychoanalyze like 100 different ways, but in the end, when he came to his father and he said, "Dad," and the father just closed his eyes. He was hiding.
Yeah.
Which he did for his mother, which he did for his wife, which he did for his daughter.
Not Montana Wild Hat.
All right, so Billy is pretending to be listless, and meanwhile he's getting a tongue lashing by Rumford, and we find out that Rumford has a problem with Dresden.
It's not so much a tongue lashing as much as he's talking about someone like they're not there. And Billy pretty much is acting like he's not there. Everybody says he's a vegetable and all this other stuff. All he does is cry in the middle of the night, talking about surrendering and leave him alone and all that other stuff, which we've seen him do in the past.
Go on without me.
Go on without me. Leave me alone. All that's... I mean, I nobody liked sleeping next to him in war.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, nobody wanted to be around Billy Pilgrim. He's got people wanting to kill him. One of those guys is actually going to have him killed.
You know what I realized when I was taking notes for this chapter was that Lazaro. What was Lazaro's name? Doesn't matter. You remember Lazaro, the car thief that said he was going to kill Billy and don't worry about it. It's just going to happen one day.
Yeah.
He told him never to answer the doorbell.
Yeah.
And you remember that the guys were going around ringing the doorbell and he was just watching out the window?
Oh, Paul Lazaro, yeah.
He was taking Lazaro's advice. He was not answering the doorbell.
Like the circular story here is really, really good. The circular value of reading the story again is high.
The reread, you're going to catch all sorts of stuff that you didn't catch the first time because it's so disjointed. Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. Absolutely, you're right.
So Rumford is like, I don't even know why doctors are dealing with him. This guy might as well be serviced by a veterinarian, or even better, a tree surgeon. Exactly.
What a dick.
Yeah. And so like he's doing this like, Billy's a vegetable, and it really doesn't matter what he says in front of him. And you're right, he has a problem with Dresden. He's reading his friends talking about Dresden, and they have like points of view. He has points of view, and he's kind of trying to work it out so that he can justify why it occurred. Like, it was a bad thing, and it really sucks that these people had to suffer it. On the other hand, it was important to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, all the V2s were raining down. I mean, everybody was to blame.
And he's Yeah, and he doesn't like when people are all boohoo about people dying in the war and don't don't care about their own soldiers.
Right.
And, so you know exactly what type of guy this is.
That was also definitely happening. I feel like this guy is a voice for a type of peoples that are in America at this point in time during the war. And he's giving voice to the arguments that they would have given to justify Vietnam or etc.
For sure.
You remember we had that guy in the Lions Club meeting guy was justifying the bombing of Vietnam. And I think that this guy is kind of like a modern version of that guy, a voice of part of America.
So this guy, Rumford, had written a 27-volume official history of the Air Force in World War II. World War II.
So he's a windbag.
27 volume. Jeez. And now he's...
And how long has the war been over?
23 years. Point is, he wants to do a summary edition. But now he wants to include Dresden. But Dresden wasn't mentioned in the first 27-volume original set. So he's putting it in the summary. And Billy's listening to him.
Yeah, and he's saying all this to, like, his wife also.
The 23-year-old go-go dancer.
Oh, yeah, go-go dancer. And he just had her read, Truman's Address? Was that?
She didn't read it. She pretended to read it.
Yeah, talking about dropping the bombs. Anyway, sorry, Phil, go for it.
Oh, no, no. I was sighing because I was like, he's having his 23-year-old wife, and he's like 70 years old. So he's having his 23-year-old wife, read this Truman speech about justifying the atrocities of war. And
she hadn't even been born yet.
And she can barely read for whatever reason.
Because she's the average.
And then Billy's like, I was in Dresden, and it's like the first thing he said to these guys, like, at all.
Rumford's ears wanted to treat the words as a foreign language that was not worth learning. He couldn't believe that this vegetable, this person who didn't deserve to live, who had given up and quit and complained in his sleep that was less than human, had been there and had information that he wanted firsthand. Because there were everything was classified. There were no firsthand accounts of people that were there.
Yeah, so he just thinks, Rumford just thinks that Billy is echoing what they're saying.
He accuses them of
there's a disease,
echolalia.
Or not a disease, but
it's
condition.
A condition. Who knows?
Where you just say what other people say.
You just say what other people say.
You just parrot.
You just parrot.
You're just doing that with me right now.
You're just doing that with me right now, right?
Oh, God damn it! You beat me to it.
Did you ever see Jacob Tutu and the Hooded Fang? This would be one of those Saturday in the middle of the day movies, aimed for kids. And this little kid always says something twice, like, "Can I have that coffee cup? Coffee cup."
Yeah.
Can you imagine a whole movie like that with this character? 95% of the time, he's on screen.
Can you imagine being his parent?
Can you imagine being his parent?
Not good movie either.
Billy wants this guy to believe him for whatever reason. So he waits until the middle of the night. He's been tested by doctors and nurses, and they've been, now he doesn't have echolalia.
This is where Rumford is suggesting it to them, and they're kind of like, he doesn't have it.
No, and they think that he is a grumpy old piece of you-know-what.
Dude, I cannot...
They do not like him.
I absolutely detest Rumford. I mean, come on.
Yeah. You're supposed to, man. You're supposed to.
I know, but what makes it worse is that I have met somebody in my life that is just like this person.
I work for a person just like this.
He was a geophysics professor in college, and I couldn't understand the man. It doesn't matter what came up. He always disagreed. No one else was right. He was always right. His ideas were always right. He was detestable.
All right, so check this out. Billy was having an adventure very common among people without power in time of war. He was trying to prove to a willfully deaf and blind enemy that he was interesting to hear and see. And so Billy waits until all the lights have gone out, everybody's going to sleep, Rumford's breathing has slowed down, and then he says out loud, so there can be no mistake about an echo, "I was there. I was at Dresden. I just wanted you to know." I will admit some human frailty here. I got very choked up a couple of times. and this was one of them, because he just wants to be heard, and this guy just doesn't believe him. Cannot imagine that this other human being is worth anything. He's already made the decisions. He has no idea. He was an air brigadier general or whatever. He was not on the ground. He didn't see anything. And Billy did. Billy saw stuff, and we find out more about what he saw coming up pretty soon. It kind of hurts me in a way, you know. It just bothers me.
It hits me a little bit, not because of what you said, which I thought was irrelevant, but I ride the train downtown, and I was riding with a coworker, and we were walking back to our office, and there was a homeless person on the street screaming at the top of his lungs, "Nobody listens to me." And he was screaming and screaming, "Nobody listens to me. Nobody listens to me." That was impactful.
You said Tralfamador?
Should I have reached out to that person? Should I have given him a hand? Should I have been a human being? Or should I have saved my skin and said, I don't know if this guy's crazy or if he's just a normal human being reacting the way a normal human being would, being alone in a crowd?
I don't talk to strangers that are crazy or sane.
You live in Berkeley.
I just want you to know. Well, I mean, that's just my way of life. I mean, it's not totally true. But I always thought it was really strange when my mom would just chat up anybody in line at the grocery store.
It's a little different.
I know that a lot of people do that, but I think it's not what most people will do.
I do it.
Would you have rolled your window down in chapter 3 or 4?
Dude, it would have been up before that guy even got close to me. And I would have locked the door.
Yeah. Would you have locked the door within his viewing and hearing?
Yeah. What do I care?
Click.
Click. In fact, you know what? Back then, you probably it wasn't automatic, so I would have made a show of it, without a doubt.
Cadillac, Seville, El Dorado. I don't remember.
The implication is that, you know, he doesn't like black people. But as we've said before, when Billy's doing that, is that he's just ignoring all life all the way through this entire
He just
book.
did it to his son. He just did it to his son.
True.
Exactly.
Good point.
2 days after the end of the war, it's May. I think the area is probably beautiful. I think spring is here. The trees are starting to leaf out. We're back in Dresden.
This is where Billy's being carted along in the back of a wagon that's being pulled by horses.
Yeah, 2 horses and a green coffin-shaped wagon. And Billy has that saber, and he's just lounging in the back.
This is like the first time he's had weapons since the war began for him.
Yeah, that's so true.
He is more armed now. Because he has like a gun too, right? You know?
Yeah, it's like a World War I gun. They said that the bullets were as big as robin eggs, which are kind of fat, you know? It's like
I was like, what? How big is this gun?
Dude, I seriously want one.
This is the most armed he's been, like I said, since the war began for him. And I mean, that's pretty weird. Like, he's out. He's done.
To paint the scenario a little well, it's just like Dresden has been abandoned. All survivors have fled because the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming.
Yeah.
And anybody who can get out did, and anybody who didn't feel threatened or was opportunistic has stayed, and they're looting, and they're pillaging, and they're finding whatever they can.
Explain to me then the couple, the married couple.
I can't explain that.
You can't imagine that they didn't have enough money to get out.
I can't explain those 2 people. I cannot. They were, by the way,
obstetricians.
Yes, exactly, specializing in childbirth.
There was a line there where they say that they didn't fear death or something like that because they were obstetricians and they...
Find it,
like
because
that?
I don't remember that. I remember that they did not choose to reproduce, and that said something about reproduction.
And that
comes back later. That comes back later. But
with the other couple.
But
right?
you know, if I could psychoanalyze their personality, which is one, they were rational and they had nowhere to go, and they were hoping to.
They were having a picnic. They were having a picnic by their old apartment.
Maybe they're just refusing to let go, and maybe they were just irrational and they couldn't accept the circumstances.
This was the other part of the chapter that really got to me because of the animal that they're so concerned with.
I was
maybe I'm
too.
conflating something.
That got me, boy. But before we even get there, there was an old man going through the ruins, and he was picking up what? And he had a baby carriage, And in the baby carriage, he was picking up pots and cups and an umbrella frame, practical things of survival on some...
Not really looting.
Yeah, he was not looting. He was pillaging for survival.
He might have been doing both, but yeah.
When you brought up the obstetricians, I don't know. I don't know why. I can't explain their behavior, but...
Well, you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, largely, I consider it like an example. Like they exist because Vonnegut wrote them into the story to tell us something.
Yeah, and I will obviously get to that at the end of the chapter.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, I think right now, like, I know people who care more about animals than human beings. And these people were very concerned with that animal, both of those animals. The horses were completely mistreated. They had no water. Their hooves were split. They were in agony. And even later on, when they were freed by the Russians, they wouldn't walk away because their feet hurt too badly.
Oh, don't get me started. Oh my God.
And the Germans, this couple, these two obstetricians, they saw the treatment of the animal. They saw the condition that the animal was in, and they were sympathetic towards it. And they chastised Billy for riding in the cart. And then Billy cried.
I know, but Billy was a city boy, and Billy does not comprehend these things. And I think that, again, that's a part of the whole story about humanity is these German people did, and Billy did not. And
they had sympathy and empathy for the animals. I don't think Billy's really aware, though.
Yeah, I agree.
However,
he's
he cared. He definitely cared because it caused him to break out and cry. And this is the explanation for why he had been crying when he was an optometrist in Ilium. When he would break out crying and had to go to the doctor to find, why am I crying? This is why. This is why. Because he broke that day.
What was the other thing that he did? It was where he was... The barbershop quartet reminded him of the four soldiers.
Yeah.
Right? Was it the four German soldiers or were they Russian? Yeah,
it was their guards. Yeah, it was their guards.
And that also really moves him later on in his life also.
In the episode that's coming out tonight that I just finished editing, I gave Philip a lot of grief in there because Philip was asserting that, Billy Pilgrim has PTSD and et cetera. And I was like, oh yeah, you diagnosed him. But I think it's extremely clear with stuff like this. I mean, it's basically stated outright.
There are these moments from the war that have affected Billy so much that why doesn't he cry? Or why is he in this moment? It's because of this. Why is he freaking out during the barbershop quartet? It's because of this situation from the war. And it's a lot of times not even seeing your your friend's head get blown off or anything like that. Your very good friend that you marched through mud and everything dies. It's your German captors. It's a horse. Very important. Animals are very important, and I'm one of those people that probably likes animals more.
There's good reason to like animals more than people.
I mean, of course there is, but even still, these are moments that affect him. Almost every other time in his life, he's just kind of moving on, getting along, whether it's before these moments or even after these moments.
I'm going to defend
I can't
him.
imagine he was really good when he was giving his daughter away at her wedding.
He might have been, actually. He was
on point that day.
Well, remember that he had that, he has a really, really good voice, and he's taken speech classes, and he understands what's expected of him in life.
Okay,
right?
Very good.
So he may have given her away, and it may have been very charming, et cetera, but I guarantee you he wasn't fully there.
Right.
Right? But let me defend Billy right now.
Oh, yeah,
Did you guys see the recommendation that the Tralfamadorians gave him in this section that we're talking about?
No, what do you mean?
They gave him some advice. They were like, take it from us, young'un. Just focus on the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ignore the bad stuff. Don't even look at it. Right? That's what they're telling him. And that's what he's doing.
I know. You're absolutely right. I don't think it's healthy or fair or realistic, but that's what they did.
I mean, this is healthy, like just trying to make it through. I think that's why he's doing it.
Well, we said it a long time ago. I mean, that's his coping mechanism, and now he's justifying. Yes. He's justifying the coping mechanism.
But what do you mean by justifying it?
I'm sorry. The advice the Tralfamadorians have given him justify his
behavior.
If you think like a Tralfamadorian, if you're Barbara or anybody else out there other than Kildare Trout,
you don't get excited, right?
Well, you think he's a nutbag.
Well, no, I guess what I'm getting at is like when hardship comes, you don't. It shouldn't bother you because you should be focusing on the good things, not the bad things.
But in doing so, he's ignoring the guy who's coming up to his car. I can't even think of all the different things he's done that's like that. But that's what he has to do to get by. I mean, he almost gets Roland Weary killed to the point where Roland Weary wants to kill him.
Yeah, he kind of did get Roland killed.
He kind of did.
That was random.
But you know what? Those other dudes died too. So Roland wasn't going to survive that either.
The only
wasn't random to Roland. Roland clearly ascribed blame to Billy.
It was all.
But there's a good quote from Stephen King that I like. It's one of my favorite all-time quotes, and it comes from The Gunslinger.
Let me misquote this now.
Yeah, I got to remember because he calls them darlings or sweethearts or something like that. So I'm going to leave that word off.
Huckleberry.
Fault always lies in the same place.
Oh, yeah.
With him weak enough to lay blame.
Yeah.
That's Stephen King for you folks. That's amazing, right? That's a good one. I love it.
I love that quote too, by the way.
That's my signature on my email.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And it punches me in the face every time you send it.
I send it. That's my business line. So I send that to anybody I'm doing business with. So they are prepared ahead of time.
Good call.
They're forewarned.
Good call.
All right, so we've dealt with the Tralfamadorian advice. Let's talk about azure and silver.
All right.
You remember what color his wife turned?
Azure.
Beautiful azure. Do you remember what color his cape is in the war? Billy Pilgrim's cloak.
I remember his shoes. What is it, like blue, I think, right?
It's azure.
Yeah.
Do you remember the color of the corpses that have been throughout the book? Blue and ivory. Those are synonymous with white and blue. And azure's blue. I mean, those are synonyms. The silver, it's not white, but it's awfully close. So Billy is garbed in a costume for the dead. What do you guys think about that? I mean, do you think that's far off? Do you think that's far-fetched? And why would he be wearing a costume?
Well, he's neither alive nor dead.
He was described as a clown several times.
Even by the those two doctors. They thought he was Polish because he was a clown.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Do you remember like Polish jokes? Because growing up in Texas, I remember a lot of Polish jokes.
I refuse to remember any of the horrible Polish jokes.
Yeah, I don't remember any of those. I don't
heard and
remember
passed
any of
on.
them. I don't remember any of those. I don't remember any of those truly tasteless joke books that would go around or anything like that. I've never seen those in my life.
So I didn't know or think about it as like being a relic of World War II, but it sounds like it might have been.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of those horrible jokes I learned from my father and my father's friends.
Can you explain to me why the Poles would have been the unwilling clowns of World War II?
I don't know other than... I'm sorry, Yul, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I think this is what it is with the Poles, is that they were often a contested country numerous amounts of times, not just in World War II. And so they've become the butt of the joke of Europe, and anytime you want to make fun of somebody, it would be a Pole joke. And I think that's pretty much where it comes from.
Well, okay. I think it was a little bit of I think it was a little bit of demonizing where,
well, it's okay to invade this country. It's just Poles.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody down the line kept saying that.
Hitler and Stalin decided, hey, we're going to cut Poland in the middle.
No. Hitler and Stalin just made all the joke books.
No, it doesn't matter. The point is they demonized them to minimize the social fallout from their occupation.
Vonnegut said that they were the unwitting clowns of World War II, and I don't understand that context.
True, I don't understand it either. I don't understand it.
Let me ask any listeners that do know to please put it in the comments, because I'm curious and I don't even know how to go about looking that up.
Without reading a lot of books. And I'm doing fantasy sci-fi.
I'm kind of busy. Sorry. Okay, so let's move on, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, we finally get to the cool part. Lucretia A. Mott.
I'm trying to remember I have a note here that says the comparison of Billy to Christ.
Oh, there's a lot of that. Well,
okay,
right
yeah, okay, that's part of it. And then immediately after that is the horses that didn't get arrested and Lucretia A. Mott. So there's a lot crammed in there.
Right.
Amazing. You guys go for it.
No,
I'm gonna pipe in.
Etienne, you bowl ahead.
All I really wanted to mention was that Lucretia C. Mott. Her middle name is Coffin.
Oh, it's Lucretia A. Mott.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's not a type. It can't be a typo. It has to be purposeful, right? But her actual name is Lucretia Coffin Mott.
Lucretia A. Mott or Lucretia C. Mott. She was an abolitionist and a suffragette in the 1800s, before and after the Civil War. A real piss cutter. I mean, like, when I read this about this woman, anybody who's out there, do yourself a favor and read about this woman, because she was pretty awesome. Reminded me of my grandmother.
You can listen to a David Bowie song. It will do it.
Well, I don't know about that.
Suffragette City? Is that the one?
Well, he did say that he was going to change names of people in the book.
Yeah, I know. But so that, which is one more thing I'm bringing up at the end of the book, which I'm holding off on.
All right. Can't wait to hear this.
I feel like it was a typo, or just he didn't know.
Could be either way. Or he changed the name by changing the
I think
initials
Vonnegut
of
had
the middle
people
letter.
that could look it up for him, even in '69.
Maybe, but at the same time, like, it's in the book, and it's not her name, and it's just one initial. So how are we possibly going to misidentify her?
Hey, man, the first thing you do when you write something is say, as the narrator, I'm going to change things just so you know. So you've got all the license you want.
You do. You have a lot of license. All right, Philip, what else you got for this section? I'm going to, after this, I'm going to jump to the back to the VA hospital with Rumford.
I don't know. The only thing that really struck me in this section is the hilarious description of when the Russians finally invaded, and they arrested everybody except the two horses in the wagon.
Do you remember last episode we were talking about... I'm sorry. It was back in chapter 4. We were talking about radium dials, and we couldn't figure it out. We're like, what does that have to do with glowing and faces and etc.? There's this line in here where the doctors, both obstetricians, she's described as softly beautiful and translucent.
But she was eating potatoes, right?
Yeah, they had been on a diet strictly of potatoes, essentially, from the war.
Which is what they needed to use in order to fuel those V2s, just to let you know.
Oh, they made alcohol out of the potatoes.
They needed like 40 tons of potatoes or something like that to put one up.
All right, so we get to the end of Billy's time in Dresden, and he gets shipped home on that ship, the Lucretia Mott. And Rumford in this section is just explaining why Dresden had to be bombed. He's defending it basically to the end.
Yeah, he's kind of like saying, oh, it must have been horrible. And Billy was like, it was. In typical Billy fashion.
Does he seem defensive to you? Not Billy, but Rumford?
I feel like he's filling air.
Do you really? I really thought he felt guilty, like defensive, like he knew that it was wrong and he was justifying the behavior. And Billy wasn't accusing him or anybody. He said, yeah, he understood completely.
He's like, it must have been hell on the ground. And Billy said it was. And he said, well, pity the men who had to do it.
Billy says, I do.
That goes right back to The Gutless Wonder. Do you remember the book written by Kilgore Trout, which was these machines that had no feelings, that were bombing people indiscriminately and didn't have any remorse for those actions?
I know of people that, like, a friend's father dropped bombs in Vietnam. It does not make for good sleeping, even though they were never really in danger. I think that is one of the... obviously you can get shot down, but that is definitely one of the things that weighs heavily on people.
But it also seemed to me like Rumford finally gave a little bit of sympathy to Billy at the end. It's like as close as he can get. As close as
it
this
doesn't
guy
matter
can
anyway,
get.
though, because Billy has an outlook on life that it doesn't matter what Rumsford thinks.
And yet he wanted him to know that he had been there. So the next day, Billy Pilgrim is taken home by his daughter Barbara, and he has a nurse/guard from whom he promptly escapes.
This is when he goes to New York, his little jaunt to New York. He wants to let everybody know about Tralfamadore and his outlook on life and all about time and how...
Did you notice that when he was like, when we're getting the parting shot from Billy to Rumford, he's like, that's what I learned on Tralfamadore.
Oh yeah. He's like, he's let it slip all the time now.
He ruined everything. He convinced this guy that he was sane, that he had been in Dresden, and then he blew it there with the Tralfamadore.
Like, I don't know what to think about that. It was hilarious.
All right, so he is taken home. He goes to New York City. He wants to get on a television show or a radio show. So he ends up watching some people from his hotel balcony, and then he wanders around a little bit. He doesn't have any real luck, and so he wanders into a bookstore because he sees Kilgore Trout books in the window.
It's a porno shop. He doesn't really seem to care that it's a porno shop. Like you said, he just wants those Kilgore Trout novels because they have different titles than what is actually on the inside. He wants the window dressing, and they're really freaked out. They want to show him like other porno stuff instead, but we'll get to that
when they
in a
do.
second.
Yeah, the funny part is they call him a pervert for wanting to buy the Kilgore Trout
You don't want to
novels.
go in the booth over here? All right, so Billy finds that he's already read these. The problem with these novels, just like the other ones that they've talked about, is that it's very much what he's going through when he's talking about Tralfamadore.
Yeah. The Big Board was the first one that he picked up. He got a few paragraphs into it, and then he realized he had read it before years ago in the Veterans Hospital. It was about an earthling man and woman who were kidnapped by extraterrestrials. They were put on display in a zoo on a planet called Zircon 212.
You have these humans in this Tralfamadorian zoo.
Tralfamadorian-like zoo.
Zirconian zoo.
And so they have created this scenario where it's the New York Stock Exchange, and they've told each of them, these humans, that they've invested $1 million for them in the New York Stock Exchange, and they want them to invest it. And when they get out of here, they get all of the money that they've earned in the New York Stock Exchange. But it's all a scam.
Yeah, there's not really any actual stock market link. They're just seeing the ups and downs of the stock market.
I know.
And et cetera.
Yeah, but the Tralfamadorians are manipulating it so that...
Zirconians.
Whatever they are, so that they can get excited about the highs and lows of the stock market.
And then religion was introduced to it too, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's...
You're right.
These earthlings are like... They had a real bad day at the market.
They lost a lot of money in olive oil futures, and so prayer was introduced.
Introduced by the Zirconians somehow.
Yeah,
Okay.
somehow.
Almost immediately, they started making money again.
Gangbusters.
So these fools are like praying now.
Yeah.
And like you said, these aliens are just manipulating them the whole time. They're triggering them so that they'll get a response, and everybody else on the outside is oohing and awing.
Okay.
On a very superficial level, it's about manipulating animals to perform in front of an audience. At a very higher level, it's about human behavior. Or that we are slaves to religion.
I think it's a critique on consumerism and capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Human behavior.
Where our mood is determined by how well the market does.
I can guarantee that my mood is very dependent on how the store is doing.
Yep. And it's so powerful that it has become a religion. So we essentially are worshiping money. What's the other book?
Oh, what is the other book?
It's about a time traveler who wants to prove that Jesus died or whatnot. Goes back to see Jesus as a child.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I remember what you're talking about.
He brings a stethoscope with him so he can listen to the heart of the dead guy on the cross.
Dude, how effed up is that?
At the end, when they take Jesus off of the cross, do you remember the two German obstetricians? When Billy was first hearing their voices, they were speaking as though they were the first people there when Jesus was being taken off the cross.
Oh.
And now this guy's traveling in time, going back in time to see Jesus, to witness Jesus. And he's one of the first people there to take Jesus down off of the cross. And he has his stethoscope and he listens and he said, the Son of God was dead as a doornail.
Good catch.
Then, for whatever reason, he measures him.
Yet another WTF moment.
Have you ever heard the phrase, the measure of a man?
Of course.
In 1958, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a book called The Measure of a Man.
Oh.
And this guy traveled in time and took the measure of a man. He measured Jesus to be 5 foot 3.5 inches long.
Yeah.
What on earth is he doing?
Yes.
Going back in time, and that's what he does. He measures his height. What a useless piece of information.
WTF until you comprehend the context. What is the measure of a man?
Dead as a doornail, though. He's dead as a doornail.
Well, these guys start harassing Billy for being all looking at the books that he has. He didn't think that was a big deal since everybody else is thumbing through magazines and stuff. That's where they're like, hey, he's looking at the window dressing and all that other stuff. But he notices a magazine at the front counter. And on it, it says, where in the world is Montana Wild Hack? Or something like that.
But he knows where Montana Wild Hack is, obviously.
He does. In fact, there are people in the porno booze. One of them had a Montana Wild Hack movie on it. But Billy doesn't want to take a look at what was going on in there.
There was something interesting there. He said that the picture was ash, soot and ash. It could have been anyone.
No, he said soot and chalk.
He didn't want to look at it.
They suppose that she's not alive. That's what they say.
She's been killed by the mob is what it sounds like. What could possibly be hidden in a place like that?
What do you mean?
The bookstore that he's in. They want to show him something. Those guys.
I know what they have. I know they have a picture.
They do.
If I remember correctly, it was one of the first photographs taken.
It's the first pornographic picture
that's what it was.
Survived, at least. It's the picture that Roland Weary had.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And there were like two Doric columns on each side, and he's like, no, this is like art. This is historical representation.
Vonnegut wrote that there were two Doric columns on either end, and they had Lee balls on them, or something like that. What a funny word.
Actually, there was something here when you were talking about Montana Wild Hack being involved in like blue pictures.
She ain't a movie star, is what I'm saying.
I tried to look it up.
Montana Wild Hawk refers to Edgar Derby as having starred in his own later on. He starred in a blue movie.
He did?
Yeah, because he was executed.
It means you cuss, you show some boob. It's a blue movie. It's like a stag film. Have you ever heard of a stag film?
Yeah, I have, but
it's just a different version of that.
Go to Wikipedia, and it says a term for pornographic films.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, Vonnegut thinks that it has something to do with filming people getting killed, too. So that's why I assumed it was illicit films.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Answer your question?
I think it does. Inappropriate.
Well enough, right?
Yeah.
Fringe.
Yeah. So
Definitely
when
fringe.
so just like this whole book, when she's first introduced to us, Montana Wild Hack, it says a movie star.
Turns out they were blue movies. Yeah, she was a starlet in a pornographic film. Or several. All right, so Billy buys his books, I assume, and he leaves the bookstore. And he ends up being able to just walk right up, get on an elevator, wait in a waiting room, pretend he works for the Ilium Gazette, and get on a radio show about the death of the novel. You should love this, Yule.
I know. Hey, I just want to point out that everybody in that room ahead of him, they're all literary critics, which there's got to be some point there.
The master of ceremonies asked people to say what they thought the function of the novel might be in a modern society, and one critic said, to provide touches of color in rooms with all white walls, and one said, to describe blowjobs artistically, and another said, to teach wives of junior executives what to buy next and how to act in a French restaurant.
I find that there's so much of this book that I must have somehow
remembered.
There's a lot to this that I feel like I've somehow obviously stolen in life.
Borrowed.
Kind of like Billy Pilgrim has borrowed.
Oh, yeah. I think
very interesting. Wow.
You are Billy Pilgrim.
I am a Billy Pilgrim in this book, for sure.
All right, so let's not go any further into the literary criticism of the day. Let's just assume that Vonnegut had his own experiences with literary critics and probably had a low opinion of them, because these ones specifically said some real dumb shit. And then let's move on to the fact that Billy Pilgrim is finally allowed to speak. It says he went off in that beautifully trained voice of his, telling about the flying saucers and Montana Wild Hack and so on. He was gently expelled from the studio during a commercial.
Right off the bat, if you're going to have all these literary critics on your show, you're probably not talking about time travel or anything like that. Okay.
Irrelevant.
So,
Completely.
yeah, exactly. So, like, already, like, there's late night shows that want to hear about this kind of stuff. This ain't the one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's the funny part is like everybody there is on the fringe of opinions, and then he's on the fringe of the fringe. So he gets excommunicated out of the weirdo club.
Well, if you're talking about literary critics being in the room, and it's this is a conversation that Vonnegut's having about them, maybe that's how he sees them when they're judging him.
Yep, that's where we're going right now.
That's my favorite part of the book.
Billy Pilgrim, after being expelled, he goes back to his hotel room. He puts a quarter in the magic fingers, turns it on, and goes to sleep and back to Tralfamador.
Back with Montana Wildhack.
What really happened to Montana Wildhack?
They said she had a cement raincoat.
That magazine suggested that her body had been sunken in the river or bay or something like that. Why are you bringing this up, though, Yule?
This is it. This is the end of the chapter. He's with Montana Wildhack. This is pretty much the last Billy Pilgrim right here.
Pretty much.
And he's got like this mantra that he remembers. It's in a pendant that rests between Montana Wildhack's breasts. What is it, her grandmother or something on it?
She wears a locket between her breasts on a silver chain. The locket has a picture inside of it of her mother, who is an alcoholic. And he said that the picture was soot and chalk. It could have been anyone. And the locket itself is the exact quote from the wall on his optometry office that reads,
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom always to tell the difference.
Right.
And that's like the first bar in Alcoholics Anonymous creed, I think. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Vonnegut didn't mention that because AA's been around for a long time.
Well, here he did.
Did he?
If her mother was a drunk, then we know why.
Okay. Fair enough. So I particularly was fond of this section because it seemed like he had this ideal relationship with her. When he shows up, he wakes up and she recognizes that he's been time traveling. And she's like, I can tell. I can always tell. And you weren't in the war. I can tell that too. And he's just like, yeah.
Where were you in New York?
The Big Apple.
Yeah. They're like, is it still called that? Of course it's still called the Big Apple.
By whom?
Everybody in modern society.
Everybody, huh?
I don't know anybody who doesn't call New York the Big Apple.
I don't know anybody that calls it that.
It's the Big Apple. Everybody knows it's the Big Apple.
That's what you say to a New Yorker, and they're like, jerk.
All right, everybody outside of New York.
Everybody, though. Definitely.
She seems to be fairly sharp, not only in reading him, but also being aware of her surroundings, which I thought was pretty, I don't know, phenomenal, but certainly noteworthy. And she said, I've heard about you in the war and about what a clown you were.
This is in response to him telling her that he watched one of her or saw that she was in a porno.
Oh yeah, so he kind of started it.
And she's nonplussed by this. It doesn't bother her at all. And she's like, well, I've heard of you too in the war, and so what a clown you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's absolutely unembarrassed by having been in.
And
porno
I don't
film.
think she should be either.
Why should she?
Well, whatever. Moving on.
There is no moving on. This is the end of chapter 9. Are you guys good to close the chapter down?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode, chapter 9 of Slaughterhouse 5. We will be back very, very soon with the final installment, which will include chapter 10 and then a little bit of discussion of just the novel in general. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, guys.